Hey, welcome to this video. My name is John Lamberton. Today I'm going to be discussing the tune Jade Visions by Scott Lafaro, which is recorded on the excellent album Sunday at the Village Vanguard by the Bill Evans Trio from 1960. And I'm doing this because 60 years ago today, Scott Lafaro passed away in a car crash at the young age of 25, which is truly unfortunate because he was this incredible bass player, an incredible composer, an incredible improviser, and he had such a modern flair to him, and all these deep sensibilities, like a lot of interactive sensitivity in playing with a trio like that with Paul Modian and Bill Evans. So I wanted to explore this tune because I think it's an excellent tune that has so much depth and a lot of ecology of material to it. So I thought that would be a worthwhile way to pay my respects to Scotty. And in addition to a sort of a quick rundown of the piece and how it works and the chords and the rhythm and all that, I'm going to explore what I'm calling the Hypercubic Waltz version and the grid stretching versions. And you might say, what the hell is that, John? If you want to know, stay tuned to the end of the video and I'll tell you what it's all about. So let's get into it. Just a quick breakdown of the tune. Pretty short form. It's an 8-bar form, A, B, 4 bars and 4 bars. It's a 9 meter. You could call it 9/4. Some people write it as 9/8. I don't know why. But given that it's 9 and we almost always hear things in 4, and there's a 4-bar, sort of like a multiple of 2 phrasing element to it, where each section is 4 bars, it makes it feel as if it's in a 16-bar form, but the specifics of this are kind of subjective, and I won't spend that much time thinking about it. The point is just that it's this very short, very sparse, very limited, set of materials that you're operating on. It's a lot more about the intimate atmosphere and the mood and the subtleties of the harmonic content, rather than how much there is. It's not one of these tunes that's all over the place. But I would say the other element of it that I really love is just how color oriented it is. Like the harmony is like there's some light functionality in it, but it's not this whole thing of like this chord leads to here, this chord leads to there. It's a lot more just like here's a chord, here's a color. You get that sense of that color or that flavor, whatever sensory analog you want to consider it in terms of. And there's this big contrast between the A section and the B section in terms of color. With the A section, you basically have what I'd say is like pandiatonism, or like, basically playing the white keys. And in the B section, we get this, I'm going to call it meta-plagal for shits and giggles to get my, meta count up of saying meta in times when it's annoying. But basically, it does a 1/4 progression, the sort of plagal thing of the amen cadence that you'd hear in religious music, but he recolors it with these different hues in parallel, which sort of changes the whole functional element of it. And I think that there's something to that I'll talk about in a second. But basically, the main takeaway from the song that anybody's going to get is this intro that's this slow, moody, like 9 groove that he does with these power chords between C and A, and it's in a 9 meter, so it's like 3 and 3 and 3, or in this case it's like 3 1 2 1 2, and the tempo, if we're considering it to be in 9/4, the quarter note would equal about 120. It might be a little bit slower than this, but we'll just call it 120 for convenience's sake. And so something to keep in mind for later is that this measure of 9/4 is 4.5 seconds. And we get that because if you have 120 beats per minute, that means that each quarter note is 500 milliseconds. So 9 of those 500 milliseconds would be 4,500 milliseconds, or 4.5 seconds. Again, this will be apparent why I'm mentioning this later. But let's check out sort of a version of this intro as played by synthetic Scott Lafaro. so that's what it sounds like. And what are the chords here? It's honestly pretty just pandiatonic, very much white key type stuff. Uh, and the chords here that I've written in standard terms that you would see in like a fake book or a real book or whatever, they honestly don't do the recording justice at all. This tune is all about the subtleties and the mood and atmosphere and stuff like that. And when they play it on the Village Vanguard record, uh, it doesn't seem like they're thinking, oh, this is the minor, like this chord. It's more just like this color of white keys over his Scott Lafaro's bass part, which the bass part is a lot more information dense than whatever this sort of set of chords is, which it seems like, oh, here's how I would relate this to a beginner that doesn't have any sense of subtlety. So you can think about those chords if you want, but think of it more as like white key modal stuff over Scotty's bass part. So this is what the bass part looks like. It's 2 bars of this first thing up top and then 2 bars of this next one. So the first one is basically like a C pentatonic, like C major pentatonic type thing. The notes you have are C, E, G, and A. They're all power chords moving in parallel fifths. And the parallel fifth thing is worth noting because when it shifts to the third and fourth measure, when it goes to this more D minor-y flavor, he moves this structure up diatonically, not strictly intervallically. So if you moved it up in strict parallel, you would get an F sharp there. And so since he has the F natural, you get a different shape where it's going to be a little bit darker. Instead of the like C major sixth, it's more like D minor sixth. So you get that from like a Dorian scale. I'm saying like a little bit of E Phrygian to taste if you see fit. Of course, those are derived from the same set of pitches. But if you wanted to do like an E minor, flat 6, flat 9, or something like that, I would think it would be hip. So that's just me though. But again, the first 2 bars being pentatonic, they don't actually, and it's not strict pentatonic because there's a B natural in the melody. So it's kind of like major scale without a 4th degree. So you don't know if it's an F natural or an F sharp. And I think this is cool because you could improvise using either one because they give you a different color where F sharp is a little bit brighter and F is a little bit darker and has more of a functional push downward. That would be one of the defining features of like the amen motion, like the plagal motion that I mentioned. But as an improviser, I like to see an option to color it either way in the first chunk, and then by the time that I've moved to the D minor 6 area, then it's a little bit more clear. So also, I mean, if you take it to be even more abstract, for the first section, you could fit, if you take some of these notes away, you could start coloring it as like a C augmented Lydian type thing, or like a B triad over C, where you get this sort of like Lydian sharp 9, or diminished type thing, auxiliary diminished. But basically, there's plenty of room to color it however you want, and Scotty is not trying to tell you where to or how to color it in the composition. It's very open and it's more about the mood. So now in the B section, you get these wacky looking chords if you are a normal person. So A flat major 7 sharp 11, D flat major 7 sharp 11, A flat minor major 7, and a D flat minor major 7. So again, these are kind of complicated looking, but I would just say this is a 1 to 4, 1 to 4, where we've modulated from that C territory down to A flat. So A flat is the 1, D flat is the 4. A flat is the 1 again, D flat is the 4. That's the plagal thing we were talking about. However, in the plagal cadence, we would have this inner voice sort of mechanics where it's pushing with tension and functional scale tones one way or another, so that you want to hear the amen. But honestly, I think that 4 to 1, 1 to 4 relationship has been so ingrained in us over the years, and you can hear this type of thing in pop music where it does 4 to 1, and they do 4 minor 1, and it has that extra push. And basically he's taken that functionality away, and I think it relies on us knowing that that's a common thing, and then he just throws some extra colors on it that move around in parallel, which is a totally different vibe than the plagal thing. Don't stress about the complicated looking chords. Basically, just think of it like A flat Lydian, D flat Lydian, A flat minor, or A flat melodic minor rather, and then D flat melodic minor. So the modes move in parallel, but it's still just A flat, D flat, A flat, D flat, and that's the whole tune basically. So. What is the Lydian scale in terms of intervals? It's 0, 2, 4, 6, 7, 9, 11. I have some, I guess, religious fervor about the Lydian scale because I'm a George Russell worshiper and I love the Lydian chromatic concept. But the cool thing about this is if you stack perfect fifths and then arrange them linearly, the first 7 notes that you get, if you arrange them linearly, you get the Lydian scale, and that's, I guess, the thinking behind George Russell's stuff. And I know that Bill was influenced by George Russell, and so I'm sure that Scott Lafaro was too. So there's this argument that Lydian has like the most vertical stability to it, I guess. And on the other hand, the melodic minor version. Classical musicians think about melodic minor in this weird way where it ascends one way and then it descends as a natural minor, which is good if you're sitting around playing exercises like a drone, but in terms of actually using it as a color and a sort of like alphabet for your improvisations, jazz musicians have done a lot better of a job of exploring the modes. You get your altered mode, your Lydian, Lydian sharp 5, your Lydian dominant, so those types of weird colorings that became really popular in bebop, and Bill Evans was great with those, does them with so much taste. But again, the plagal thing recolored with these scales, I think is pretty hip. So now let's talk about the 9-ness of it all. So I said it's in a 9 meter. I would say that you could even maybe reduce it to 3 and treat it like a bar of 3, whatever you want to call the denominator, and then you fit 3 in each of those. But literally the groove that he plays, as visualized here, is 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. But then the bridge, does this 4 and 5, 5 and 4 thing, which goes back to, is 9 an odd meter? Is it a compound meter? We'll talk about it in a different video, but I think that's more interesting to talk about compound versus prime. But I would say that this tune is cool because it's 3 times 3. It's a waltz within a waltz. And so it's a recursive waltz. It's a Drosty effect waltz. It's a waltz to the second power raised to an exponent. So I like to take this a little bit further and consider, what would you do with a cubed waltz? So that would put you in a meter of 27. And since each bar is 4.5 seconds with the 9, and that's 120 beats per minute, if we were to smash those 27 units in the same amount of time, that would be 4.5 seconds divided by 27 gives you 166.6 repeating milliseconds. And that's a reasonable tempo for like a 16th note. So if you treat that as the 16th note, then you're kind of at like 180 beats per minute. And so I don't know, I think it's interesting to fit the waltz within the waltz within the waltz. And that might sound like this. All right, and now the moment you've been waiting for. What is the hypercubic waltz? What is the tesseract waltz? What is the simplex 4 waltz? So that would give us 81 units, because 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. And if you're fitting that into 4.5 seconds, you run into some problems, because that puts you just around like 56 milliseconds for the smallest unit. That's very fast. That's inhumanly fast. That's superhuman fast. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and say 81 units in the 2 bars. So you have 9 seconds to fit those 81 units, which makes each base unit 111 milliseconds. So it could be like a 16th note with the quarter note at 135 beats per minute. So that would sound like this. All right, so now I know you're thinking, well, what about the waltz raised to the 5th power? What about a waltz raised to the 6th power? What about a waltz raised to the nth power? Well, you can do this, but since we're getting to increasingly large numbers, you aren't going to really be able to fit it into that 4.5 seconds, unless you want to have it played by a synthesizer and still have it sound like shit. So if we basically take some liberties and fit it into the entire form, so 3 raised to the 5th power is 243, and if we want to fit that into the whole tune, Jade Visions, which is a 36-second form, if we follow it to the T, that means that each rhythmic unit is 148 milliseconds. So you have 243 instances of 148 milliseconds, and that would put the quarter note around 101 beats per minute. And the trick here is that the harmonic rhythm would get a little bit squirrely because it would shift about every 30 units, and that just has to do with the 8-bar structure of the tune, like the form of it. But it would feel about the same anyway, so we can take this further still, do what I'm calling the grid stretching version of Jade Visions, and we just have to keep some thresholds in mind to be sort of realistic. Let's say that our minimum unit duration is 200 milliseconds. So that would give us these thresholds and allow us any arbitrary meter within this range. So for 1 bar, which would come to 4.5 seconds, you can really fit no more than like 22 units in there. For a 2-bar stretch, it would be 9 seconds. You could fit maybe 45 in there, and then 90 units in a 4-bar section and 180 units in the 8-bar form. And I know that we just did 243 in there, but it was going to be fast and really complex anyway, so this is a little bit more reasonable. But you could set your threshold to 1 millisecond if you want, and just have all of it be in absurdity land. But you'll see here these little screenshots from a spreadsheet that I made, and I'll tell you where you can get access to the spreadsheet in a second. But you have like your tempo, your pulse, which 500 milliseconds I'm saying, and you could input any novel meter, and it will tell you the tempo that you have to scale to maintain the pacing of the original tune. So in the case of, if we were to switch from 9 to 13, that would mean that the half note is about at 86.7 beats per minute. And that can sound like all sorts of things. You could do 13, you could do 19, you could do 11, you could do 10. They're all over the place. So here's what some of these would sound like. So now you're wondering, where can I hear more of these rhythmic shenanigans as applied to Jade Visions? Where can I hear 13? Where can I hear 10? Where can I hear 11? Well, I got a whole album of them to download for free once you sign up over at the Woodshed, which is located at patreon.com/Lambertronics. And in addition to that download link, you can get access to this rhythmic grid calculator and a lot more educational content, and early access to the Bridge podcast, where I interview all sorts of guests, including musicians, futurists, food people, all over the landscape of various genre-related domains. So if this interests you, head on over to patreon.com/Lambertronics. If not, thanks for joining me. Go listen to some Scott Lafaro and bask in his greatness. Thanks for joining me. Bye.